Episode 55 of the Press Box Podcast is here, and in this episode we're going to talk NFL football, specifically quarterbacks and building a successful team. We're going to start talking about the quarterbacks and then kind of delve into the front office and coaching aspect and talk about what it takes to build a team that's going to compete year after year versus some teams that seem like they never compete, some teams that are always bad. So we'll delve into some team building / successful quarterbacking aspects of the NFL, a topic that I think that is a very interesting topic because every fan base and every coach and every team is looking for that quarterback and that key to success that's going to take them to the Super Bowl. So without further ado, let's get into that on episode 55 of the Press Box Podcast.
So welcome back to the Press Box Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ralph Miranda. I'll be joined by my other co-host, Joseph Miranda, in just a moment. Today we're doing episode 55, which is our Junior Seau episode, 55, for those of you that might be counting at home. Today we're going to talk a little bit NFL football, particularly quarterback play in the NFL. The NFL is through 3 weeks. We have a few undefeated teams. We have some winless teams. We have a lot of teams that are either 2-1 and 1-2. But one of the things that Joseph and I were talking about, kind of off the air yesterday, was the quarterback play. As you all know, I'm a big Giants fan, and now the question is starting to come out about Daniel Jones. Is he really the answer for the Giants? The Bears benched Mitch Trubisky Sunday, and now they've decided to go with Nick Foles. So that's kind of going to be the gist of our discussion today. We would love for you to join us in this discussion. So hit us up on Twitter. Remember, our handle on Twitter is @PressBoxPod. Let us know your thoughts on what we're talking about today. Joseph, quarterback play in the NFL. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on that topic?
Well, my initial thoughts are, I think something I said Sunday when we were watching the games, and that's just, there's basically only 4 good quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, I thought that was what I threw out there. I said that. But if you actually think about it, okay, you've got Brady and Breeze, who I would consider good quarterbacks, who you can obviously win a Super Bowl with. They're not at the top of their games right now. They're a little bit older.
They're older, right?
But they're still in the class of good quarterbacks.
Right.
Okay, all right. And then I think you've got Russell Wilson, still Aaron Rodgers,
right,
and Mahomes,
right,
who are all good quarterbacks at the top or near the top of their games,
right.
And I have to throw Roethlisberger in the Breeze and Brady camp.
Category. Okay.
Good quarterback. A little over the hill at this point, probably.
Right.
So that's what, 6?
6. Yeah.
Yeah, six good quarterbacks in the NFL. Everybody else is worthless as far as I'm concerned. Okay. I mean, pick anybody else out that I didn't list there. You can go 10-6 with a guy like the Ravens do it all the time. Lamar Jackson. You can go 11-5, but you're not going to win anything. All right, Kirk Cousins, not going to win you anything. He's a nice quarterback. All right, so there's really only 6 guys you can count on. So that's what I'm saying. And I guess you're going to lead into the discussion. If you can't get one of the 6 guys because they don't come around every year, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that, and I think my take on it is we were talking about Daniel Jones after his performance Sunday against the 49ers. He started, I think it was 14 games last year. He started all 3 this year. He has turned the ball over multiple times in just about every game he's played in, I think, except 1 or 2. All right. Now, he's a young quarterback. Obviously, young quarterbacks take time to develop. I mean, let's face it, Peyton Manning threw 20 interceptions his first year as a starter. So that's not so much my issue. My issue is, we're taking a guy with the 6th pick or the 1st pick or the 2nd pick or whatever you want to talk about, and we're putting him into a team that really has no players on it. I mean, most of these teams that are drafting at the top of the draft are bereft of talent. So you're asking Daniel Jones to throw touchdown passes, move the ball down the field, and don't turn the ball over when A, you have no running game, all right? Even with Saquon Barkley, before he tore his ACL, he couldn't even get out of the backfield because the offensive line is so pitiful. They can't protect him, so he's got guys in his face constantly, especially on downs where they know you're going to throw the football. And you've got a defense that maybe 20% of the time, if that much, can compensate for a turnover. In other words, he'll turn the ball over, and the other team will take the ball and drive right down the field and score. So before you know it, you're down 7-0 or 10-0. So my point was that rather, if you've got a top 5 pick and you know you need a quarterback, okay, why don't you go ahead and do one of two things? Either draft the guy that you think is the future of your team and put him on the bench for 3 years like the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers, and bring you in a Fitzpatrick type of guy, or bring you in a Nick Foles type of guy, or you name the classic backup quarterback you want. Let him play for a couple years while you build that team. Or take that top pick, trade it for a bunch of draft picks, kind of like Jimmy Johnson did back when he took over the Cowboys in '89. They had Herschel Walker. That was their big ticket. He traded him to the Vikings for like 2 or 3 players that he really didn't want, but mostly for 6 draft picks. And that's how they got guys like Michael Irvin. They got guys like, Emmitt Smith was one of those picks they took. And you build your team that way. And then when you have a football team in 3 or 4 years, you take the guy that you picked and you put him in there. That's the way, to me, that you build a football team. Because when you take a Sam Darnold or a Josh Allen or a Daniel Jones, or who you name the guy, and you put him in, now after 3 or 4 years, he hasn't done anything. Now you got a decision to make, right? You got to decide, hey, am I going to pick up the option and pay this guy, or am I going to cut bait? If you cut bait, you're starting all over again. So I just don't understand the philosophy. I mean, does that make sense, or am I off base?
Basically, you're saying build your team first. What if you have no offensive line, you have no running game, but you have the first overall pick, and you have a quarterback you think you'd really like? Would you take him?
That's why I said take him, but make sure you have a guy that can play for 2 or 3 years while you build the team.
Okay, so basically just accept the fact that you're not gonna be very good for 2 or 3 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would. You still got to pick the right guy, though.
That's right.
Okay, so, and sometimes there may not be a guy to pick. That's the right guy.
But that's when you trade it, like you said, or if you don't have a guy you
trade. Okay, all right, that's what I'm getting to. I think you're better off trading that pick. Like the Bears, they traded up to get Trubisky to 2.
Yeah,
but they have 3. They didn't trade very far.
No, they didn't trade very far.
Right,
3 or 4.
All right, they could have taken their top 5 pick and traded back to get more players, like you said.
Yeah.
But then I wouldn't have even tried to get a first-round quarterback. I would have got one of these guys. So you get multiple picks, and then around that time they're bringing in Khalil Mack. They had Tariq Cohen and another running back.
Well, now they have that Montgomery.
Maybe you're still there, but they had 2 running backs that were pretty good.
They're good defense.
Yeah, they have good defense. Okay, then you get, I don't know who was out there. Maybe at that time it was Kirk Cousins or whatever. Get a quarterback that's not in one of the 6 good quarterbacks and try your best. Go with
Taylor.
Yeah, go with the Ravens Trent Dilfer model, or the Buccaneers Brad Johnson model, and take an okay quarterback and try to have such a good team that you can overcome that.
Well,
but now that's not as ideal as having a good quarterback. But like we just talked about, A, you got to pick the right guy, and B, there may not be a right guy to pick. You look at Trubisky's draft class. I didn't like any of those guys really. Mayfield, bum. Darnold, bum. I don't really like Josh Allen. I don't think he's that good. Turns out Mahomes was the guy out of that class. Right. Only the Chiefs knew that. I didn't really even. He wasn't really even on my radar. So.
Well. Here. Let's look at it this way. You mentioned don't wait and take a guy later. Okay. Let's look at how successful that's been. Okay. You're right. You got to make an assessment of who the right guy is. Okay. But let's look at Russell Wilson was a 3rd-round pick, right? Patrick Mahomes was technically 1st round, but they didn't take him till like the 2nd round, or maybe the last pick of the 1st round. Mahomes was taken late.
I think he was like taken 12 or 11.
I don't think so. Nathan can check that for us. All right.
Prescott was a 4th round.
Prescott was a 4th-round pick, and I would tell you people are going to argue with me on this, but I'll tell you right now, Prescott is a darn good quarterback. Okay, he's not a 4th-round pick. If you'd have known back when he came out, what you know today, you'd have taken him in the first round.
Mahomes was the 10th overall pick, round 1.
Okay, thank you. I sit correct. Okay.
Kirk Cousins, 4th rounder.
Okay, but Kirk Cousins, 4th round. Look what the Patriots did. They knew they were going to lose Brady, right? In fact, Belichick wanted to lose him. Before they lost him, what they took, that Jared Stidham from Auburn, I think they took him in the 2nd round, okay? But did he start him? No. He went and got Cam Newton. So he's developing that guy, okay? My point being is that the landscape is replete with guys that were taken in later rounds, have become really good quarterbacks, and have led teams to Super Bowls. Why is there this clamor? And it seems the media drives it like they drive everything else today. Oh, you got to take a quarterback. You got to take a quarterback. That's how you build the team. I understand that. You got to have a championship quarterback. But he doesn't necessarily have to come in the top 2 or 3 picks.
Right. But you better have a good team around him.
Exactly. If you're going to start him, you better have a good team around him.
If you're not taking one of these top picks that can take you to the promised land, you better have a really good team.
Okay.
But I think
the Cowboys make Prescott look good.
But I'm not.
Because they're not a bad team.
I understand. So you're saying if you're going to take a guy in the 3rd or 4th round, you better have a good team.
If you want a chance to win a Super Bowl.
Well, you don't have to have a good team then, though. You get a guy like you said, a stopgap. You let him learn under him, and then maybe in 2 or 3 years, now you use all those other picks to build your defense, build your team, and then you have a good team 4 years later, and then you start playing him. Or he's in his 2nd season now.
Let me ask you this question. Nathan's right. Let me ask you this question. All right, I'm a Giants fan, right? Okay. What would you rather have as a fan? All right, look at the Giants. They won the Super Bowl in 2011. They just missed the playoffs in 2012. They had a pretty good year. But from 2013 to now, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is their 8th season. One good season, all right? And that was because they went all in on getting a lot of defensive free agents, and it paid off for them. They still didn't have a good offense that year. Would you rather have 8 out of 9 years of pitiful football where you've had top 3 picks, or would you rather go ahead and trade all those upper picks, get a bunch of draft picks, be maybe 2-14 for just 3 years, and then all of a sudden, bang, you're right there? I would rather have that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, but they're not doing that, okay? And a lot of teams are not doing that. They just constantly seem to be turning over quarterbacks and turning over the team, and then constantly being 3-13, 4-12, year after year after year after year. Okay, and that's what I don't understand. You see, that's what I don't get.
What do you do if, I guess it's Joseph, what do you do if you take your quarterback, right? You don't have a great team, but you take your quarterback you really want. Maybe it's in the 1st round, right? But then you get a guy like Cam Newton at the end of his career, somebody that has a stopgap.
Right.
He learns under him. You hope you try to build your team in the next 2 or 3 years. So then, I'm sorry, no, let me take it back. Joseph was saying that if you take a late round guy, you better have a good team. If it's a 1st round guy, he can make your team.
Right.
Because let's say you get a quarterback you think is going to be your guy in the 3rd or 4th round. And then you try to build your team up. But then, for whatever reason, 3-4 years down the road, your team's still horrible. And you have to play this quarterback. Like, what do you do then? You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, that's where all right, you make a good point.
What if you can't build your team up while he's waiting in the wings to...
Okay, but you should be able to build it. In other words, what I'm saying is a quarterback takes a lot of time to develop, okay? It takes time for a quarterback. Peyton Manning, his 2nd year as a starter, they were 13-3. But they lost in the playoffs. It took Peyton Manning a few years, even though he was great. It took him a few years to really become the quarterback that we know as Peyton Manning, okay? Even Tom Brady, it took him a few years to become what we know as Tom Brady. It takes a while to develop these guys, okay? So you've got to build your team, and it should be a lot easier to build your team by picking linebackers and running backs and wide receivers than it should be to get the quarterback, okay? That's my point.
Yeah.
I've always agreed that I think most of the time throughout history, I haven't looked at all this in depth, but I think most of the time throughout history, the best quarterbacks are the ones who are not like top 10 picks from a big name college. They're guys from kind of like mid-level Division I colleges.
Right.
You don't hear about them much in college. Maybe they're a late 1st round, 2nd or later pick.
Right.
And they're the ones who become great. That's why I kind of, even though he was a high pick, I liked the Josh Allen pick because he came from, what college did he go to? Wyoming. It seemed like a type of college that a future Hall of Famer would come from. Right. I mean, like that makes sense. Or Mahomes, Texas Tech. These guys aren't like from Alabama or Georgia. They're not these big name college quarterbacks.
Right.
Because I think most of the time those type of guys, for whatever reason, aren't the guys who become the best in the
There's a case to be
NFL.
made for that.
Aaron Rodgers from Cal. Dak Prescott went to Texas,
Mississippi
State.
Roethlisberger, Miami, Ohio.
Miami, Ohio. Eli Manning, Ole Miss. They weren't exactly a
Joe
powerhouse.
Flacco, Delaware.
Exactly.
Drew Brees, Purdue.
Right.
Exactly, that's my point. What if you go back farther?
Drew Brees was a second round pick.
Go back even further. Aikman went to UCLA in Oklahoma, but he played mostly at which one?
He played at UCLA.
UCLA. Where did Steve Young go?
He went
BYU.
to
BYU.
Brigham Young. Yeah.
That's my point.
All right, but you're right. You're exactly right, and I agree with that. But let's go back to your first point you made. Let's go back and look at how many quarterbacks that have been Super Bowl winners have been number one picks, or not many, right?
That's my point too.
Eli Manning was, Peyton Manning was. Okay, name me another one. I can't think of one. Can you?
Well,
over the last 15, 20 years.
Okay.
All right. Terry Bradshaw was the number one pick.
Look at Kurt Warner, one that took 2 teams to the Super Bowl.
Exactly. I bet you if we sat here, and we don't have time to do it now, but I bet you if we sat here and went back to 1970, I'm willing to bet just off the top of my head, that you might find 5 or 6 guys in those 50 years that were number one picks that turned out to be Hall of Famers that led teams to Super Bowl.
I still think you'd find a pretty small. I still think the percentage of guys who were first round picks would be relatively small.
Relatively, but probably more first rounders.
Okay.
I mean, you got guys like Mahomes, and you got guys like
We'll have to
Roethlisberger.
look this up for a future episode.
We'll have to, but I mean, my point, it goes along with what Nathan was saying, is that I guess my point is that there's a clamor out there. It's almost like general managers don't have enough guts, and Belichick does enough guts to tone out the clutter from the fan base, from the media, from all these people, that you got to take your quarterback right away. You don't have to, okay? You don't have to. You can build a team around a quarterback and utilize that quarterback's strengths and still get you to a Super Bowl. I really believe that. I mean, I may be wrong about that, but I still believe it.
That's what the Seahawks did. Pete Carroll took over in 2010.
Exactly.
And so 10, 11, they didn't draft Wilson until 12.
Right.
And then, by the time they had him, they already had their defense, their Legion of Boom.
Exactly.
And they had NFC Championship game in 2012.
Well, still, the key is Russell Wilson is actually a good quarterback too, though.
Right.
Correct.
If you try to go the route we're talking about, take a guy a little later, and he's not good, it doesn't matter how good the team is.
But
unless you, there's a few exceptions like the Ravens and Trent Dilfer and those type of things.
Let me ask this question before I forget, and we'll never be able to answer it. But did Russell Wilson become what he became because of what Joseph just said, that they already had the team around him? Had they taken him in 10 and they didn't have the team around him, would he have become what he became? See, that's another point that I'm trying to make, is that when you put a young guy into a system where he's getting beat up all the time, okay, will he really develop? Or when you put him into a team that's built, does he have a better chance?
Look at David Carr.
Okay, but you can still tell if they're good or not. That your point just depends on how much success they have. Look at the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. He's
how about the Peyton Manning? His first year they weren't very good, but you said you could tell he was going to be good. Is that
what I'm saying is what Wilson did. We know he's good because he won a Super Bowl with them.
I understand.
All right, Lamar Jackson hasn't done that, so he's not good. Lamar Jackson is coming into a Ravens team that's good, just like Russell Wilson did. Russell Wilson won them a Super Bowl, got them to another one. Lamar Jackson can't do that. Ergo, Russell Wilson's better than Lamar Jackson.
Okay,
that's what I was trying to say.
We'll talk Lamar Jackson in a minute. Go ahead.
But how would you? What are your? I don't like this term, but what are your metrics for determining if a quarterback himself is actually good if he's on a team that's not very good his first couple seasons? Like let's say Wilson was drafted in 2010 when they were horrible. Well, what would you have had to see from him to let you know that we are horrible, but he is not?
You got to. I don't have any numbers or metrics. You have to just look at. Okay, can he? Are they in playoff contention? Is he having some? Does he have some good games? Like here's an example. Take Deshaun Watson. Okay. And compare him to somebody maybe like Sam Darnold, all right? The Texans and the Jets are both not that great. You've seen flashes from Deshaun Watson. He's had some big games, 4 touchdown passes. They got to the playoffs last year with him. I don't think he's. I didn't mention him in the start as my good quarterback list, but he's way better than Sam Darnold. The Jets are horrible. Yeah. Now, if you take somebody like Deshaun Watson and put him on the Jets, I think he would make some plays, make some hay. Where you're like, oh, this guy's got some talent. Like. maybe the Jets win 7 or 8 games one year, but they're not doing that.
Okay, so maybe like you said, if Watson's on the Jets, maybe they still don't win many games,
right.
or he doesn't take the playoffs, but he has a few flashes. He might throw 5 touchdowns in a game, have a few big
or
games.
Or even puts a couple weeks together, like, this guy's really good. It's too bad the Jets are terrible.
I see. Okay.
Well, and I understand that. I guess I understand that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. You asked me a question yesterday, which I thought was a good question, when I was talking about the Giants. You said, you put Aaron Rodgers on that team. Okay, well, let's discuss that. If you take Daniel Jones off the field and you put Aaron Rodgers into the game, how different would the Giants be? They have no running game. They have no offensive line to protect him. They have no receivers to speak of. Okay, would he really be that much better with the Giants? Now, he may make some better decisions. He may not throw the ball. He may not throw the ball in a situation where he shouldn't throw it. But I don't see the Giants winning that many more games.
All right, but this Lazard guy that had 2 touchdowns, is he a good receiver? No, he sounds like somebody the Giants would have. The Packers receiver. Aaron Rodgers made him look great Sunday night. All right, I never heard of the guy.
Maybe he had time to throw him.
Great, but I think, to use your example, I think the Giants are on 3. I think they'd be at least 1-2 with Aaron Rodgers.
I have to agree with that too.
Yeah, they would be 1-2. I agree with that. They would be one. They would have beaten the 49ers with Aaron Rodgers because they had and they might have beaten the Bears.
They might be 2-1.
That's right.
Right. So I mean, the quarterback makes a big difference.
Well, it does. Yeah, it does. I mean, in that case, it does. But I just think that it's hard to. I just don't think you need to take a quarterback with the first in the top 5. If you
we can agree that you don't just take one just to take a quarterback.
Yeah.
Sure. But we better take a quarterback. Let's just take one.
So you're saying don't take one in the top 5 unless you have a team around him. But what if he's really your guy?
Or you're willing to sit him for a while. That's my point.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think when you put a young quarterback in a situation where the team is not very good, it takes a special person, okay, to be able to handle that situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
because he's going to get beat up. The media is going to be on him. I mean,
destroy his confidence.
Yeah, I just think it takes a special guy not to lose his confidence in that situation. And then you asked a question, which that's what I had forgot to say. You asked the question: how do you know if a guy's going to be a good core? How do you know if he's developing? Well, we're never going to find that out as fans. But I think you look at when he throws an interception, whose fault was it? In other words, did the receiver run a wrong route, or did the quarterback make the mistake? Did he overthrow a guy? Did he make a wrong read? Those are things that coaches are looking at and need to develop, okay, to be able to figure that out.
The ball over, that's pretty obvious one for fans to see.
For fans to see, but we don't know all the time that it was the quarterback's fault.
I don't even mean that. I just mean like maybe holding on to it a bit too long and get strip sacks, or trying to get out of the pocket and he loses the ball.
Exactly.
Like that.
A quarterback should never fumble the football. Right. I mean, unless he gets blindsided. But Daniel Jones has a propensity, and Eli Manning did too, unfortunately, of when you're in the pocket, he gets hit and he drops the ball, or he's not real. Good.
When some people get around him, he doesn't bring it to his body to protect
Exactly.
him.
You don't see Aaron Rodgers doing that. You don't see Tom Brady doing that. You don't see Roethlisberger. That's on the quarterback. But the interception thing sometimes is not. So as a coach, you got to be able to figure that out. Okay, it took the Bears 3 years to figure it out, right? I mean, of course, they didn't have anybody they could put in there, but now they've got Nick Foles. All right, but they're going to have to make the same. They're going to have to make a quarterback decision again soon. They're going to cut bait with Trubisky, but I got news for you. Nick Foles is not the long-term answer. Okay, so these teams that are constantly picking quarterbacks, I mean, it just doesn't do any good. I mean, look at the Redskins or the Washington football team. Okay, they drafted this Haskins guy.
Horrible.
All right, he's horrible. Okay, why would you pick him when they picked him? Okay. The guy played 1 year at Ohio State. He may end up being good if he'd had more seasoning, but he's not very good. Okay, and now I tell you what's going to happen with them. He's going to start this year. He's going to start next year, and then when they get to year 4, they're going to realize that we can't give this guy his first contract, and they're going to start all over again.
They'll reach again for a quarterback when they start over again.
Exactly.
One piece of credit I'll give to the Washington football team is that they were smart enough not to lock up Kirk Cousins to a long-term deal.
But they paid him too.
I know, but they let him walk, and turned out he's not that good.
Kirk Cousins is the smartest man to ever play football, okay? I'll tell you why. He got 2 franchise tag payments from the Redskins, which totaled probably $60 million. Right. And he got a $90 million guaranteed. He's made $150 million guaranteed, okay? and he's an average quarterback. I like Kirk Cousins. I think he's a fine human being. I would love to have him on my football team, but the guy is not a Super Bowl quarterback.
Well, who's following that same model as Dak Prescott. Here's year one of his franchise tag. Maybe they do it again next year. Maybe he signs a guaranteed deal. He's about equal to Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, but you see, when I watch Dak Prescott, he shows flashes of being able to put a football team on his back and carry them, though. He throws for 400 yards. I mean, he does a little bit, and he can run.
Yeah, he's more mobile.
Yeah, he's more mobile than Prescott is.
He's bigger. He's a little harder to bring down.
And that brings up the next question to segue into the Lamar Jackson world. That's where the NFL seems to be going, though. I mean, you got all this run-pass option. You want you got to have a mobile quarterback, a guy that can get out of the pocket if he needs to. But that's part of the problem is that teams are looking for that guy, that Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes type guy, and there's not a lot of them out there. I mean,
they're good.
I said this yesterday. I'll give the Ravens credit for one thing. Okay, they didn't take Lamar Jackson and try to make him do something he can't do. They rebuilt their whole offense around him. The problem with Lamar Jackson is, we saw that Monday night against the Chiefs. Okay, is when they can't run the football, he's no good. Okay,
because they're behind.
Exactly, because he can't throw the ball to the perimeter. All right. So what are teams doing? They're taking away the middle of the field, forcing him to throw to the perimeter. And we saw multiple occasions of him overthrowing, underthrowing. He just doesn't have it.
It seems like in those situations where either they can't run the ball or either they're not successful or they can't because they're down by a line. They have to throw it. When he does keep drives alive and move the ball, it's usually with his legs.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like he might have a couple plays where he breaks out of the pocket and gets a first down, but it's all on his legs.
Exactly. And then what? Yeah. And then what you find out is like Monday night, they were down 7-3. They went away from the running game. So that's stupid.
I have no idea why. After that, how could you be the offensive coordinator and watch that first drive the Ravens put together, and then all of a sudden quit running the ball or quit trying to run the ball?
Exactly.
I mean, they drove the ball down the throats the first drive primarily on the running the ball.
Exactly.
The Ravens, I told you this the other night, they're a front-running team.
Yeah, they are.
And I saw a stat week 2, I think it was, that they broke a record from some team in 1920 for the most consecutive games, regular season games, not having trailed in the second half.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they either tied or ahead in the second half for the last 14 games.
Right.
So, but then we saw on Monday night what happens when they have some adversity and they get behind, they're done. So they better be in control of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And another problem the Ravens have too, which they're a pretty good running football team. And I said this yesterday when we were talking, is that all our discussion that we've had here so far is built on the fact that the NFL today, it's all spread offense, right? I mean, 5 wide receivers, 4 wide receivers, one back in the backfield. So you still have to have a running game. You got to be able to run the football. If you can run the football, it protects your quarterback. Because now your defensive linemen, they tire out. And then when you throw the football, they don't have the legs to rush the passer. Second thing is it builds play action, If you can run the football and that quarterback can stick the ball in the running back's belly and take it out, now you've got to honor that. It gives him more time. So now you put a young quarterback, that isn't developed in a system where he has no running game and defensive linemen are teeing off on him, It doesn't help him to develop. He can't make the reads as fast as a guy that's been in the NFL so for a long time, So the way the NFL's become has also led to the fact that you can't develop quarterbacks anymore like you could, unless you're able to let him sit for a while like the Packers did with Rodgers.
Yeah. Well, these guys we're talking about all set, right? You got Rivers sat behind Breeze. Roethlisberger played
pretty much
right away.
Manning sat for a year.
They had a good team to the Steelers. They had really good
Eli Manning sat half a year. Carson Palmer sat a full year.
Right.
Roethlisberger, when he first played, he had a great running game. Bettis and all those things.
Favre sat for a couple years in Atlanta.
1 year in Atlanta.
All right.
Yeah. So that doesn't happen anymore. Well, it sounds like the Dolphins are going by your example. Then
they are.
They got Fitzpatrick as their stopgap, and they're sitting this Tua guy.
Exactly. If the Dolphins are smart, they won't play Tua at all this year.
Yeah, they
regardless.
shouldn't. I hope not.
But here was my point, though. I guess they're going by your theory, right? Build your team up. I guess your overall theory can be summed up by build your team first, quarterback secondary, correct? So while you have high draft picks, if you don't have a good team, build your team first. But unless you have a quarterback that you think is a once-in-a-lifetime type of pick, you can draft him in top 5 or number 1 overall pick,
right.
but sit him until you can build your team.
Right.
So let's say the Dolphins did that. They thought, we need Tua. He's our guy. They drafted him early, right? He was like number 3 or whatever.
10.
10. Now they're trying to build their team. Well, I'm willing to bet in the next 2 or 3 years, the Dolphins are still going to blow. Okay, so then now what do you do? That's what I was kind of saying. Now you have Tua Tagovailoa guy or whatever.
Right.
It's time now. He's set for 3 years. You can't sit a guy for 5+ years. You got to play him. You failed to build your team up.
Right.
What do you do now? Like, he's not going to have much success if the team's horrible, right? Or are you saying that he will be successful even if the team's bad because he's been sitting behind Fitzpatrick for the last 3 years?
Well, go ahead.
I got 2 points. I'll say it first one and then go to you. But the ceiling for the Dolphins is like the Bills. All right, they draft Josh Allen. Does anyone think they're actually good? I mean, the record's good or they're considered good, but they're not. They're not a serious team.
Okay, but Josh Allen was playing right away. But my point was, if Josh Allen were still sitting behind somebody, he would have a very good base to come into play because the Bills' team is actually pretty good.
And they were good before they had it.
Right. So my point is, had he just sat for a little bit, I think he would have been better off.
Right.
But the Dolphins were bad when they got Tua. They're going to be bad in 2 years from now. So I know the chance that he plays well is going to increase because he sat for some time.
Right.
But the team around him is not any good. So how do you remedy that when it's time to play him? What are you going to do?
First of all, also worth noting, Mahomes had a full season. He started week 17.
He did. Yeah, he did.
And he had a pretty good team around him.
Right.
If you can sit for a couple of years and you have a good team, that's obviously the best case.
Well,
if you can sit but your team's horrible, what do you do?
That leads me to another point we've talked about is what do these teams that are always good do differently than the teams that are always bad? Right? Like we named some teams: Steelers, Packers, Seahawks.
Ravens are usually never winning.
Ravens are in this category. Probably the Saints. Where the last 15 years, they're always good.
Right.
Some teams even further. When's the last time the Steelers went 2-14? I don't remember the time. Or the Packers. And then you've got those group of teams, okay? And then you've got the teams like the Lions and the Dolphins, like Nathan's talking about, the Browns, the Bengals. Well, the Bengals have made some playoffs here. Maybe they're not quite.
That was all in Carson Palmer's back.
Yeah, those teams that are maybe once in a blue moon they'll go 9-7, but usually they're 5-11, 4-12. And over long periods of time, like the Lions, take the Lions. In 2005, they had a completely different personnel.
They're horrible.
They're still horrible.
Right.
It's a different, but they can never. What's the difference?
Well, I tell you what I think the difference is. They don't have a team. They make poor decisions. I'm not talking about quarterbacks. Well, I'm not talking about quarterbacks. I'm talking about the team.
I think we're saying that's a given. They don't have a team. Why can they never get a team?
In 2008, they went 0-16. They're still terrible.
Okay,
they had a completely different team.
That goes to a discussion that we haven't really, that this podcast is not really was meant to discuss. Is that you've got too much turnover in the front office. You're changing coaches constantly. Look at the Browns. How many coaches have they had in the last 20 years?
I completely agree with you that teams change coaches way too often. Even if the coach doesn't look to be very good, they change way too quickly.
Wait a second. But also they hire the wrong one too. Now take the Browns. Should Freddie Kitchen have gotten 4 more years? No.
Right, but then
some changes are warranted.
But that even goes one step above. Then you look at the owner. Okay. Look at the Browns owner. The guy's an idiot. I'm sorry, he's from Tennessee.
He can't do anything
He
about
wants
that.
his hands on everything. My point is, if you're here's how I think it works. Okay, it starts this way. Cowboys separated. You got an owner, right? He owns the football team. Okay, he doesn't. I don't care how much he thinks he knows about football. He is the owner. Hire you a good general. Why are the Ravens so good? All right, their owner doesn't get involved in football operations. Okay, he hired Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie Newsome's was around for years.
He's smart too.
A good general manager, right? And that general manager makes the decisions on who to hire or who to fire, okay? And like you said, when you get a coach, if you believe he's the right guy, let's say you really believe in your heart that he's the right guy, okay? You can't fire him after 2 years if they go 3-13 and 4-12. You just can't do it.
And I'm willing to bet every single time a team makes a coaching decision, they think he's the right guy in their heart. Otherwise, why would you do it?
Right.
Freddie Kitchens, he wasn't great. They had to believe he was the guy in their heart. So why not give him those 4 years? That's my point. I mean, if you really believe in a guy when you make him the head coach, and even if you start to realize he's not, if you really believed him, give him the time.
You know what bothers me?
Don't change 2 years later.
And you know what bothers me about the Giants? Okay, they fired Coughlin. All right, they shouldn't have fired Coughlin. Okay, they should have fired the general manager back then, not Coughlin. Well, then what they end up doing? A couple years later, they fired the general manager. Okay. You promoted this McAdoo guy. Okay. He had one great year. All right. Then you fired him because he benched Eli Manning and they had a terrible year. Okay.
Probably should have fired him. That's what I'm saying.
Well, they should have fired Coughlin is what they should have fired.
Right.
But anyway, you're right. Well, then they bring in this Shermer guy. Okay. And all he kept saying in every press conference, he had a bad attitude at the press conference, and it kept saying, "We're just going to go back to work. We're just going to go back to work." You know what scares me about the Giants? That's the same thing this Joe Judge is saying. We're just going to go back to work. Well, it ain't working, okay? You're going back to work, but it's not working, all right? You don't have a football team. Now, my point is, you have got to make good draft decisions. It's not about the quarterback always. You got to make good free agent decisions. You got to make good draft picks. You got to build your team with draft picks, okay? Let's go back to the Cowboys situation I mentioned. Different era. There was no salary cap. It was totally different, all right? But they drafted Troy Aikman number 1 in 1989. They were 1-15 in 1989, the Cowboys. Aikman took a beating, and there was even some question at that time as to whether or not he was going to be a really good quarterback. What did Jimmy Johnson do? He had one asset on that team, Herschel Walker, that everybody thought was great, who was really at the end of his career. He traded him to the Vikings for like 6 draft picks and 3 guys that he really didn't want. Okay. Those 6 draft picks, as I said, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin. Well, actually, Michael Irvin was already there. Emmitt Smith, I can't think of the names now, but a bunch of other guys. He knew he wasn't very good, so what did he do? He built draft picks, get guys in there. That's how you build your football team. And then Aikman became a better quarterback. Why? He had Emmitt Smith. He had another receiver from Tennessee, that Alvin Harper. Okay, so that's how you do it. Okay, that's how you do it.
Okay, so maybe. So do you think that most of the time, the cases where teams do not accomplish that, is it because they don't know how to do it, or is it because they know the formula you just said, but they just make the wrong decisions? Maybe that's the thing. Maybe they're just not as good front office people as Jimmy Johnson.
I'll tell you what the problem is. I'll answer your question. Why I think is Jimmy Johnson and Bill Belichick don't give 2 hoots about what the fan base thinks and about what the media thinks. But these general managers, I really believe this is the case. Most of them have no guts. And you remember the movie Draft Day? Everybody wanted him to draft the quarterback, right? Quarterback. And when he picked the linebacker from Ohio State, oh man, they were all over him, and even the owner. But he had the guts to do it, and it turned out all right. All right, that was a movie. But my point is...
Did we know it turned out all right? Huh? Did we ever see after
we don't know. But my point... Here's my point. What I'm saying is he made some trades, and it worked. All right, my point is that they're afraid. If they don't pick the quarterback, or maybe their owner is telling them, you've got to pick the quarterback, like it did in the movie. You got to have the guts to say, hey, that's not the right pick. We're going to trade these picks for more guys. Okay. All right? The Giants, they can't build an offensive line. No matter... They just can't, okay? They picked last year the lineman from Georgia with their 3rd pick, was it? Or 4th pick? I don't remember. 4th pick. Why didn't you trade this guy? He's the lowest rated rookie offensive lineman in the NFL through 3 games. Okay? This guy that the Giants...
you should like that pick, right? Because they're building their offensive line.
Here's my point. Why didn't you trade it for a bunch of picks and pick 6 or 7 offensive linemen and then weed them out? In other words, figure out if they're the right guys.
You know my feeling on that one.
I know you do.
I agree too. You don't need to draft offensive lineman in the first pick.
The guys you get in the 6th round are just as fat and big as the guys in the first round.
Okay, but that's my point. If you'd have traded that pick at number 4, and let's say you got 3 picks for that, and then you traded the pick at 34, you would have gotten 6 or 7 picks. You could have taken some offensive linemen in the 3rd and 4th round. Maybe they would have panned out.
So all these guys know that's the way to go about. They just don't have the guts to do it because there's pressure from their owners and from the fans. That's what you're saying.
Yes, because forget about the fans. There is pressure from the fans, but the pressure from we got to win now. Okay, right. And I understand winning is the bottom line in all this. I believe in that 100%. But as I said earlier in the podcast, is it not better to lose miserably now for a few years and then be competitive for 10 years? Or is it better to lose?
But like Judge was talking about, there has to be there's another option that's not either lose horribly for a couple of years, then be good, or be bad for all these years. Some teams never even have to lose. I mean, like, they rebuild and they remain like around 800 or 500, I mean.
Yeah.
So how did they do that? I'm sure the Steelers have had to kind of rebuild at some point over the last 20 years, but they never seem to be 2-14.
That's right. They don't.
So there has
because Roethlisberger, he's been there since 2005.
Okay, so the way you overcome those 2 or 3 horrible years, you have to have a good quarterback.
But here's the point: last year Roethlisberger got hurt early. They had the Duck Hodges and what. They still were 8-8. Yeah. Okay, they still had a chance to make the playoffs.
They weren't rebuilding at that time, though, right?
But my point is, here's my point. Okay, if let's say the Giants, I don't know. Let's say the Giants 5 years ago Eli Manning would have got hurt in the first game. I bet you they would have gone 2-14. Yeah. Okay, that's the difference. Is that the Steelers had enough good players on that football team and enough good decisions of how they ran their offense or whatever to eke out 8 wins.
I'm just saying that if you already have a good team like that, you'll be fine. Like you said, but if you're in the process of rebuilding that team, and like you said, sometimes you may have to have 2 or 3 years if you're really bad while you're in that process.
Right.
Well, I guess the way to be in the middle of that process and not have those 2-14 seasons is to already have your quarterback, right? If you already have your Roethlisberger and then you have to kind of rebuild the rest of the team, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's a different story. I mean, if you've already got the guy, that's different. But my point is, the Steelers, the Packers,
No. If Rodgers goes down, the Packers are a 3-13 team. Maybe that's a little harsh.
But you remember the year Rodgers went? Didn't he go down a couple years ago? I mean,
and that what's the guy's name?
I forget that guy's name.
Number 7.
Yeah, but they weren't 3-13.
He did all right. He won a couple of games.
Hundley or
yeah. He was all right. I mean, like they didn't lose a lot.
They also had the guy from Notre Dame, Deshaun Kaiser, played for them for a while. My point is, they don't go 3-13.
Which one of those guys was the guy that just like threw the ball up in the air, like when they were trying to? Remember that in Cleveland? And they were like trying to drive down.
Was it 17 he got hurt?
I think so. I know.
One of the guys just threw the ball up in the air and he got like
he just tossed it.
He was about to get sacked and just tossed it.
But see, I think the answer to that question is those teams that are able to be consistently good. They might have a bad year here and there because the quarterback got hurt or key guys. I think they have good front offices. All right, they have good general managers. They have good scouts. They have a good solid owner. That's the difference, I think. Okay, and I think until you're able to get that, you can't do that.
And you mean good from the standpoint of they try to do the same things everyone tries to do, they're just better at it. Or do they try to do? Or are you saying there's some guys though who do certain things that other teams are afraid to do?
I think they do things that other teams are afraid to, and they believe enough in their system.
It's the general managers, not the owners, because the Giants have a quote good stable ownership.
Yes, they do,
but they're not like the Steelers. The Steelers also have it. The Lions have a great ownership. That Ford family has been owning them forever, and they never in the media or anything. They never say anything.
But see, But here's the thing: is the complete reverse of what we said with coaches applies to general managers. In my opinion, we said that you can't pull the plug on a coach too early. Right? I agree with that. But I think with the general manager, you have to have the guts to do that. Okay? The Giants had a general manager. Okay? I forget his name off the top of my head. I should know it, but he took over in 2007 from Ernie Accorsi, who drafted Eli Manning. They won the Super Bowl in 2007. All 7 of the Giants' draft picks in 2007, Jerry Reese, that's his name. All 7 of his first draft picks in 2007 contributed to play the Super Bowl. All 7.
All right.
Now, so he got a lot of political capital from that, right? In other words, and then they won another Super Bowl in 2011. But they held him too long. Okay. 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 till they fired him. You can't keep the guy because, hey, we won 2 Super Bowls and he had a great first one. You got to see that his drafting has gone downhill. He's making poor decisions, okay? You got to fire him and get somebody else in there. That's another thing that I think the owner has to have the ability to do. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I do, and I think that kind of falls back onto the fan. Most fans never call for the owner to be. Call for the general manager to be fired.
Exactly.
They think it's the head coach, get a new head coach. So I think the owners think, well, it's easy to put all the blame on the head coach, and then the fans would be happy.
Exactly.
I agree with that.
That's a good point.
I agree with that.
But you got to have the guts to say, hey, wait a minute. This general manager, he was great. No question about it, but he's lost it.
Yeah, but to your point, if they say that and they tell the fans, we're going to come back with Freddie Kitchens, but we fired our GM, they're going to be like, I don't care, fire Freddie.
All right. One point I want to make about the coaches, and I'll use the Chiefs as an example, but then I close the page now, but from like it was like 2007 on, Chiefs had a lot of losing seasons, 4 wins, 7 wins. It was the guy Andy Reid turned around. Right. I think you have to get a real coach. Okay.
I agree.
Andy Reid had coached the Eagles for 12 years, got to the Super Bowl. They went and got a real coach. They didn't try to find some 27-year-old offensive whiz kid and like, oh, he's the next great thing. Because a lot of times they fall flat on their face, right? Go ahead.
No, you're good.
No, I was going to say, we kid around. I said I'd hire Bud Grant, Vikings trooper before, but, if you're a team that needs a coach right now, and let's say Tom Coughlin was interested in coaching, go out and get Tom Coughlin. He's a real coach.
I agree.
Don't get the Cowboys offensive coordinator that's 31 years old or something nonsense. A lot because that doesn't work. Like the Giants. Oh, let's find the next Bill Belichick. Let's get an obscure special teams coach and you studied under Belichick. Well, the guy's a clown. All right, go out and get. I'm not sure these guys want to coach, but go try to talk to Bill Cowher or go get
Joe Johnson.
Huh?
Joe Johnson.
He's too old, but
what? But Grant's not too old, Joseph.
It's already been
around with that.
It's already been.
I'm saying get a real coach.
It's already been proven that guys that come from the Patriots don't make good coaches.
Right.
We've seen that.
But my thing with that's a great plan if you want to win for a couple. If you want to be good for a couple of years, but what makes a lot of these teams we're talking about so good is they have coaches who stick around for decades. All these Andy Reids, Bill Cowhers, they have to start at some point. At some point, somebody took a chance on a young Andy Reid, and he was the Eagles coach for 15 years.
That's true too.
I mean, if you want to be good for a couple years, do what you said. But what if you're thinking, hey, we want to have the next Andy Reid. We want to have a guy who's going to be with us for 20 years. I mean, like,
okay, well then
you gotta at some point you gotta take a chance on a younger
right,
guy.
but then you better be right.
Well,
like,
yeah, I know. But
I don't know. Some teams get it right. I guess you're.
All these guys start as young coaches. Andy Reid,
John Harbaugh.
I think he's
he
one
came out of nowhere. Mike Tomlin. He was nobody.
And what was John Harbaugh in the job? He was obscure special teams.
Yeah.
So you can't hate on the Giants for attempting that.
But here's something that we're forgetting that we'll never know the answer to. But I think it goes a long way. You mentioned Andy Reid. The Chiefs were no good until they got Andy Reid. Back, you guys don't remember this, but back when Bill Parcells coached the Patriots in the mid-'90s, remember he took them to the Super Bowl against the Packers? Okay. And part of this was his ego, but part of it makes a lot of sense. When he decided to leave the Patriots, it was before the Super Bowl, he said, if you want me to cook the dinner, you ought to let me shop for the groceries. His point was, you want me to build a good football team, you got to let me have some say in the players I'm getting. That's part of coaching. In other words, maybe the reason Andy Reid was so good is that maybe their general manager was good enough to say, hey, Andy, who do you like? You see, there's got to be a communication between the coach and the general manager when they make a pick, right? You can't just pick a guy and say, here, Nathan, coach him. Okay? There's got to be communication there. Okay? Same with the owner. He's got to sit down with the general manager and say, do you have everything you need? Who are you thinking about picking? Have you consulted Andy? Have we talked? That's what the good franchises, I think, have. Okay. The Steelers, the Packers, the Chiefs now. And we'll never see that because we're not behind the scenes.
See, those kind of environments you think are what give birth to the Parcells type coaches or the Bill Cowhers or those type of coaches.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't hate just this idea. You could go 5 years at a time recycling these older coaches who had near the end of their career. That's not a bad idea.
Look what the Redskins did years ago. They brought back Joe Gibbs.
Yeah, they did.
Now, that proves Nathan's point a little bit. They had a 3 or 4 year run where they made the playoffs a couple times.
But then get another Joe Gibbs type.
Yeah, right.
Get Marv Levy right after him. Right?
Marv Levy's 95.
No, but back then though, they could have done that, right?
He was like 80 back then. But
Paul, you can go from older great coach to older great coach.
They don't have to be old. Like Andy Reid wasn't that old. He just happened to become available. I mean,
right, but you could go if you needed to. You could go from an older coach 5 years at a time. That's
okay, but you see, another problem we have here too.
Jeff Fisher. Go out and get Jeff Fisher. He's a real coach, as far as I'm concerned.
I think his time in LA really hurt him.
You got to have the players though too. I mean, no coach is going to stand up in front of the media after they lost their third game in a row and say, we just don't have the players, right? They're not going to say that. So that's why. Well, but that's what they should say. But that's why the frustration of Shermer last 2 years saying we're going to go back to work. That's why Joe Judge knows he has no players. They got nobody. Okay, right. But my point is that's where the frustration comes in. The fans then hear that and they say, "What's wrong? Fire the coach. We got to have."
Well, what would you like Joe Judge to say in the press conference?
I would like him to say, look, okay, guys, we're a young football team. We really don't have enough players to compete right now, okay? We're trying to develop the ones we have, but it's going to take a while to do that, all right? That's what you got to say. Okay. Shermer tried to say it a little bit, but he couldn't, okay? They don't have the players. Now, part of it is coaching, but it takes a while to coach young players. to get them to the point where they can be good. And then you make mistakes. They've probably made some mistakes.
I'm not saying I disagree with that, but would you be okay then with a quarterback like Daniels might come to press conference? Listen, guys, we just don't really have the people in place in the front office right now, and the head coach that's going to help us win. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to be able to improve until we really get a good GM and a coach. But until then, I'm trying my best. But once we get a good coaching staff,
a player can't say that.
But a coach can say about the players.
He's not calling out any players, though.
But the coach is not calling. But the player's not calling out anybody specific. He's just saying we need a better front office.
Yeah, but
take out the coach.
But how many guys are in the front office? I mean, 3 or 4. I mean,
we need a better organization. I need a better organization around me to really succeed. How's it different than saying we need better, more established players around us?
Okay, touche. I'll give you that. All right, you're right.
I'm just saying.
No, you're right. You're exactly right.
If the coach said that, that sounds really great. But if a player says that, you probably wouldn't like that.
Probably not. You're right. I mean, touche. I'll give you that point.
But you might like it, but people wouldn't.
Yeah, that's the problem though, is that they don't have any players. But then that goes back to our discussion. Then the general manager comes into play. I mean, you got to.
I think we're just talking in circles.
Yeah,
well,
probably wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. All right.
No, I'm just saying.
No, I think so. I think we've
there's a lot of factors that go into a good team. I don't know. It's a crapshoot. Just try to draft somebody.
I named the 6 good quarterbacks at the start of the podcast. The Super Bowl winner will come from one of those 6 this year. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Mark that
Is
down.
Philip Rivers not now or ever in your 6?
I don't put him in there. No,
ever
he's just
in your
below
6?
there.
Philip Rivers, I don't
know you
so.
like him. I was just asking.
I don't think so.
So.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So that's it. Yeah. So hey, listen, I hope you enjoyed the discussion. We really had some heated discussion, not heated from a bad standpoint, but we really got into it, and I'm sure everybody who's been listening to this has either vehemently agreed with us or vehemently disagreed with us, or maybe have some ideas. So hit us up on Twitter. I mean, tell us what you think about everything we talked about, and how you would solve it. Who's your favorite team, and are they one of the ones that are consistently good, or are they one of the ones like mine that's consistently bad right now? So, let us know what you think.
Yeah, definitely. We might get a poll question up there as well. Thanks for listening today. And next episode, we have an exciting one. We have a special guest on. We'll talk some college football with him. So look forward to that coming soon on the Press Box Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.